Hey everyone, welcome to the Night Only Lives today. Meet Encrid, a soldier mocked for having no talent and no hope of becoming a knight. But death gives him an impossible advantage. Whenever he falls, he wakes at the start of the same brutal day with every memory intact. Each defeat becomes training, pushing him closer to victory. If you enjoy underdog heroes and time loop action, like and subscribe. Now let's begin Chapter 1. On a battlefield already drowning in blood, Encrid faces the same armored swordsman who has killed him again and again. The enemy's blade is too fast for his eyes, yet the instant it cuts his neck, Encrid memorizes one more detail about its angle, timing, and reach. Instead of staying dead, he wakes at the beginning of the same morning. The camp, the insults, and the march all repeat exactly as before. Only Encrid's memories remain, forcing him to understand that this terrible day will not release him until he finds a way through it. Encrid has trained for years, but everyone still calls him talentless. Natural-born warriors surpass him in months, while his dream of becoming a knight sounds like a joke. Even so, he refuses to accept that effort is meaningless simply because his progress is painfully slow. Each return becomes another training session. He studies the battlefield, adjusts his grip, and watches the fatal swordsman from a different position. A mistake costs his life, but death also gives him information that no ordinary soldier could survive long enough to collect. After 20 attempts, the opening thrust no longer feels completely invisible. Encrid can sense where the point will appear, but knowing is not the same as moving fast enough. His body fails repeatedly while his mind builds a clearer image of the attack. On the 21st confrontation, Encrid finally avoids the blade aimed at his neck. The victory lasts only a moment, yet it proves that repeated experience can push him beyond the limit others assign to him. Death has become a brutal teacher instead of an ending. What makes the cycle valuable is not supernatural strength, but continuity. His wounds vanish each morning while the fear, timing, and hard-earned understanding remain, letting one ordinary soldier build experience no normal lifetime could provide. When the morning begins for the 22nd time, Encrid rises without despair. He grips his sword and walks toward the battlefield once more, determined to turn an endless cycle of dying into the road that will one day make him a knight. Encrid wakes to the same voices, footsteps, and morning light he heard before his death. Every soldier stands in the same place and repeats the same words. The precision of the repetition confirms that he has not survived by chance. Time itself has returned him to the start of the day. Fear gives way to a dangerous possibility. If his memories remain after death, then a man without talent has been handed unlimited practice. One day is too short to change a life, but the same day repeated hundreds of times could become more training than any gifted swordsman receives. From that moment, Encrid stops wasting the morning. He drills his stance until his muscles burn, tests the weight of his sword, and memorizes the timing of every signal in camp. No one notices that the clumsy soldier beside them is accumulating days of experience. His comrades continue mocking the dream he has carried since childhood. Encrid no longer argues with them. Their laughter belongs to a single version of the day, while every correction he makes will follow him into the next morning and the one after that. He also studies the battle ahead. The route, the formation, and the first signs of the enemy ambush become fixed points in his memory. By comparing each failure, Encrid begins to separate bad luck from mistakes he can actually correct. When the army enters the canyon again, Encrid is ready for the attack hidden beyond the rocks. He watches the terrain instead of blindly following the soldiers in front of him. Moving before the first strike reveals what he already knows. He carefully distinguishes reckless sacrifice from useful practice. Encrid does not want to die. He wants every attempt to answer a question, preserve a lesson, and carry one measurable improvement into the next identical morning. The armored warrior who ended every previous attempt is still waiting deeper inside the battlefield. Encrid steps toward him willingly. He has not become stronger overnight, but he now possesses something his enemy cannot imagine: the experience of losing this fight many times. The canyon ambush erupts once more, but Encrid moves before the first attack reaches him. He remembers the flight of the arrows and the path taken by the charging soldiers, allowing him to escape positions that had become graves in earlier versions of the day. Every exchange is treated like an experiment. Encrid changes the distance between himself and his opponent, shifts his feet, and tests different angles of defense. When a choice fails, the pain of death brands the answer into his memory before the morning resets. The process is merciless. He is cut down for reacting too early, too late, or in the wrong direction. Yet each failure removes one uncertainty from the battle. The enemy's overwhelming speed slowly becomes a sequence of readable movements rather than an act of magic. Encrid learns to preserve his strength while the other soldiers panic. He passes the first attackers, reaches deeper into the canyon, and forces the enemy commander to acknowledge the supposedly insignificant swordsman approaching him. The final duel remains unequal. Encrid lacks the power, reflexes, and natural instinct of the warrior before him. What he has instead is a collection of lessons purchased with lives, giving him answers to attacks that should have surprised him. For the first time, his sword reaches the opening he has been chasing. The moment is brief, but it proves that the wall is not impossible. Enough observation, pain, and repetition can move even a talentless man one step closer to victory. The repeated battle also changes his temperament. Panic becomes observation, frustration becomes method, and the shame of losing disappears. Encrid starts judging each death only by whether it revealed something he can use when the canyon appears again. Encrid accepts that he may need to die many more times before the day releases him. That price no longer frightens him. As long as every death leaves behind experience, the endless battlefield is carrying him toward the knight he still intends to become. Encrid's struggle continues against the brutal warrior whose movements resemble a leaping frog. The opponent possesses strength and instinct far beyond his own, forcing Encrid to rely on the details preserved from every previous death. He remembers the weight of each impact, the pause before a lunge, and the opening created after an overextended strike. One correction at a time, Encrid turns a hopeless beating into a contest in which he can finally survive long enough to counterattack. The last exchange is decided by patience rather than talent. Encrid refuses to retreat, draws out the attack he has studied, and drives his blade through the opening. When dawn arrives without dragging him back to morning, he realizes the repeating day has finally ended. Wounded but alive, Encrid is taken to the medical barracks. There he meets the infamous members of the 4th Squad. Violent Rem, Talkative Cries, Silent Jackson, Devout Auden, and the distant swordsman Ragna. They are not a polished elite unit. They are dangerous misfits who ignore orders, fight among themselves, and make every commander regret receiving them. Encrid is less concerned by their behavior than fascinated by the individual skills hidden beneath the chaos. Surviving the loop has changed the way he sees strong people. Instead of envying them, he wonders what each member can teach him. The squad may be impossible to control, but it is also filled with the kind of strength Encrid has spent his life pursuing. The victory, therefore, means more than defeating one enemy. It proves the loop can be cleared and that tomorrow still exists beyond an impossible day. Encrid enters the medical ward carrying both serious wounds and the first concrete evidence that his stubborn method works. The uneasy introduction ends when the Elven platoon commander Vengeance enters the ward. Her attention settles on Encrid as she asks for the leader of the 444th Squad, placing a new responsibility in front of the man who has only just escaped death. Vengeance visits the medical barracks and calmly studies Encrid, the unlikely commander of the 4th Squad. Their conversation is polite, but Encrid notices how easily she controls the room. Before leaving, she questions Cries, whose awkward answer hints at a hidden noble background. As soon as his injuries allow it, Encrid returns to training. He recreates the attacks that nearly killed him, including the fatal thrust and Rem's crushing axe. His hands tremble from exhaustion, yet he repeats every movement as if another mistake will cost his life. Cries asks why he is so desperate to practice. Encrid answers that he wants to avoid being hit the next time and finally admits his impossible ambition. He intends to become a knight. Instead of laughing, Cries promises to remember the name of the man who said it. The following morning appears normal, but the day after that begins with the exact same actions and words. Encrid understands that he must have died in his sleep without noticing the attack. A new repeating day has formed around the medical tent. He searches for an assassin capable of entering a guarded camp without sound. Suspecting vengeance after her quiet visit, Encrid stays awake and watches the entrance. The enemy never appears in front of him. A poisoned needle strikes from an unseen direction and paralyzes his body. Unable to move or shout, Encrid watches a hooded killer murder the wounded soldiers and stab cries. Then a second figure enters with pointed ears and movements as light as the wind, revealing that more than one infiltrator is involved in the massacre. The revelation is especially cruel because the people around Encrid do not remember dying. Their ordinary conversations restart without fear, leaving him alone with the image of cries being stabbed and the responsibility to change an event no one else knows is coming. In his final moments, Encrid realizes that his suspicion was close but incomplete. The elven figure is connected to the leadership behind the attack, and the medical barracks is only one target in a larger operation. Death resets the day, giving him another chance to expose them. The assassination day begins again, and Encrid now knows the medical barracks will be attacked. He changes his position, stays awake, and prepares to intercept the intruder, but a poisoned needle still finds a gap before he can identify where it came from. The killer is not merely fast. He hides his presence, reads the room, and attacks from outside Encrid's awareness. Raising an alarm too early changes the timing, while waiting too long leaves every wounded soldier helpless. Encrid dies roughly 20 times while testing different answers. Each failure reveals another fragment. The direction of the needles, the moment the blade is drawn, the path through the beds, and the route the assassins used to leave the tent. Knowledge alone cannot solve the problem. Encrid can predict what should happen, yet his senses still fail to catch an attack from a blind spot. He needs a skill that was never part of his ordinary sword training. Among the fourth squad, Jackson is the obvious person to ask. The quiet soldier can approach others without warning and detect danger before it becomes visible. To Encrid, that talent is exactly the wall he must learn to build around himself. Rather than asking Jackson to kill the assassins for him, Encrid requests instruction. He wants to recognize the ambush, stop the first strike, and protect the people behind him with his own hands. He also learns that repeating the same defense without understanding it is useless. The assassins adapt to obvious preparation, so Encrid must improve the person facing them rather than rely on a single trap. Jackson's specialty offers a permanent answer instead of a temporary trick. Jackson sees that the request is serious. His answer is simple but demanding. Eyes are useless against an enemy who never enters the field of vision. If Encrid wants to survive, he must learn to separate the sound of death from every other noise in camp. Jackson's training begins in the middle of the noisy camp. Encrid must identify footsteps, flapping flags, birds, armor, breathing, and distant conversations without turning his head. What sounds like a simple exercise quickly overwhelms him. The problem is not a lack of sound, but too much of it. Every noise competes for attention, and Encrid cannot decide which movement carries danger. Jackson teaches him to discard familiar rhythms until only the disturbance that does not belong remains. The assassination night returns, and Encrid still dies on the 33rd and 34th attempts. The blade reaches him before his mind can translate the warning. Even so, the instant before death gives him a new sound to remember. Each morning he repeats the exercise. Ordinary footsteps fade into the background. The medical tent gains an acoustic shape, and the movement of a hidden body begins to leave a trace. His ears are slowly learning what his eyes could never provide. Encrid also connects sound to intent. A soldier walking past the tent has a predictable rhythm, while the assassin pauses, shifts weight, and cuts through the air with unnatural control. Those tiny differences become a map of the attack. When the killer enters again, Encrid does not wait to see a face. He hears the line of the approaching blade and turns toward it, placing his weapon between the strike and the wounded soldiers. This training demands patience different from sword drills. There is no visible target and no satisfying impact, only long hours of listening and failure. Encrid accepts the boredom because the smallest shift in awareness may be the difference between warning the ward and watching it die again. For the first time, faceless death has a location. Encrid has not won, but he has transformed an impossible ambush into a fight he can participate in. That single defensive movement opens the path to saving everyone trapped inside the barracks. Using the hearing sharpened through countless failures, Encrid intercepts the assassin's first strike. He is still slower and less skilled, but he no longer dies without resistance. Every second he survives keeps the killers away from the wounded soldiers behind him. The struggle tears through the medical barracks and finally alerts the camp. Vengeance and nearby troops arrive before the attackers can finish their work. Forced to retreat, the infiltrators set the tent on fire and use the smoke and confusion to disappear. The damage remains severe. Only a few patients survive, yet this version of the day leaves prisoners, tracks, and living witnesses. What had looked like an invisible massacre can now be investigated as an organized attack against the military camp. Exhaustion pulls Encrid into a strange dream. In the darkness, an unknown presence speaks as if it has been watching his repeated deaths. It promises that they will meet again, suggesting that the power returning him to morning may not be entirely his own. Encrid wakes and immediately checks the date. The morning has advanced instead of resetting, proving that he cleared another repeating day. The pain, the hearing exercises, and every failed defense have become permanent parts of his ability. He returns to the 4th squad expecting a quiet reunion and instead finds the same violent disorder as before. Rem starts trouble, the others argue, and no one behaves like a proper soldier. For Encrid, the chaos now feels strangely familiar. The survivors may believe the defense was a sudden act of courage, but Encrid knows it was assembled from many invisible failures. Every person rescued represents a version of the day in which he listened too slowly, moved too late, or chose the wrong threat. The assassination has ended, but the lesson remains. Encrid understands that each member of his unruly squad possesses a skill worth learning. Surrounded by dangerous companions, he begins preparing for the next wall that will force him to grow. For days after returning to the 4th squad, Encrid spends every free hour training. Auden pushes his body, Jackson continues refining his hearing, and Rem provides the kind of live combat practice no wooden target can reproduce. During a sparring match with Rem, Encrid combines techniques gathered from separate struggles. The beast's heart controls his fear, the stabbing form guides his sword, and his ears warn him about movement outside his direct line of sight. Rem remains overwhelmingly stronger, but the fight is no longer effortless. He must change his timing and take the exchange seriously. The violent warrior realizes that the commander once dismissed as talentless has become a different opponent. The other squad members notice the same change. Encrid still lacks natural genius, yet his willingness to repeat a lesson until it becomes instinct is difficult even for gifted fighters to understand. His progress is slow, but it never stops. At the same time, rumors spread that the camp is cursed. Soldiers connect the medical barracks attack, the dead infiltrators, and other unexplained events, making Encrid's presence a convenient focus for their fear. Command decides to send him away from the center of the unrest by attaching him to a scouting unit. The order separates Encrid from the squad just as their unusual training arrangement begins producing results. Leaving the squad is frustrating because each member has become a living textbook. Still, Encrid carries their lessons with him. Auden's endurance, Jackson's awareness, Rem's pressure, and Ragna's example of what disciplined swordsmanship might eventually look like. Encrid accepts without complaint. A reconnaissance mission means unfamiliar terrain, dangerous enemies, and another chance to test what he has learned. The 4th squad watches him leave, reluctantly aware that their strange commander is becoming important to them. Vengeance orders Encrid to join a reconnaissance unit operating beyond the main camp. The 4th squad protests in its own disorderly way, but even its members admit that no ordinary officer is better suited to manage a group of unpredictable fighters. In the field, Encrid meets Andrew Gardner, the arrogant leader of the scouts. Andrew immediately belittles his background and questions why a mediocre mercenary has been given authority. Among the scouts is Henri, a former hunter who reads terrain better than rank. Andrew follows uncertain tracks and ignores Henry's warnings. The first route produces nothing, reinforcing his belief that confidence is the same as competence. Encrid says little, observing both the land and the weaknesses inside the unit. Their next search leads into Green Pearl, a field of grass tall enough to hide armed men. The place is unnaturally quiet. Henri notices the absence of animal signs, while Encrid feels the pressure of an attack before he can explain where it will come from. Experience bought through repeated death makes him react first. Encrid shouts for everyone to get down just as arrows and hidden soldiers burst from the grass. The warning saves a heartbeat, but the scouts are already trapped inside a prepared killing ground. Formation collapses as enemies strike from directions no one can see. Andrew's commands only deepen the confusion, and the reconnaissance party is cut apart before it can escape the field. The disaster exposes a second danger inside the unit. Andrew values authority more than information, while Henri sees signs he lacks the power to enforce. Encrid will have to solve both the hidden enemy and the command structure that keeps delivering the scouts into its hands. As Encrid falls among the blood-soaked grass, he recognizes the familiar shape of another wall. Green Pearl has become the center of a new repeating day, and this time escaping alone will not be enough. He must learn how to bring the entire unit home. The Green Pearl massacre sends Encrid back to the morning before departure. He knows where the first arrows will come from, but every route Andrew chooses eventually places the scouts inside a larger encirclement. Encrid's hearing allows him to dodge early attacks and identify movement in the grass. Even perfect warnings cannot save a unit commanded by pride. The true obstacle is not the ambush alone, but the man refusing to adapt to it. Encrid challenges Andrew in front of the scouts and defeats him. By taking command, he removes the decision that ruined every earlier attempt. He then asks each soldier what they still need to return alive for, giving the frightened group reasons to hold together. Andrew admits that he wants to restore his fallen family. Henri relies on the instincts of a hunter, while the others reveal promises and people waiting beyond the battlefield. Encrid turns those private motives into discipline stronger than fear. When they enter Green Pearl again, he refuses to let the enemy choose the first move. Henri fires a probing arrow into the silent grass, forcing the hidden formation to react and reveal the positions it believed were secure. Encrid immediately orders the scouts to strike the exposed flank. Their knowledge, spacing, and timing transform the prepared massacre into an ambush against the ambushers. Taking command is not simply a matter of winning a duel. Encrid must make frightened people trust orders that contradict everything they were told before. By learning what each scout values, he gives them a reason to endure the uncertainty of a plan only he fully understands. For the first time, the reconnaissance party moves as a unit instead of a collection of victims. Andrew follows Encrid's commands, and the hunters become the hunted as the scouts cut a path deeper through Green Pearl. With control of the scouts, Encrid uses memories from failed loops to avoid the most dangerous patrol routes. The group isolates small enemy teams, eliminates them before they can signal, and keeps moving instead of celebrating minor victories. War hounds and pursuit squads repeatedly force them to change direction. Encrid does not attempt to win every encounter. His goal is to preserve the unit, choosing the path with the fewest unavoidable casualties rather than the one that looks most heroic. Andrew resists taking orders from the man he once mocked. When the encirclement tightens, he remembers his promise to restore his family and finally places survival above pride. That decision allows the scouts to function under a single command. Encrid studies the enemy net and waits for sunset. At one precise moment, the patrol pattern opens a narrow gap. Henri leads them through the terrain while Encrid controls the pace so no exhausted soldier is left behind. They pass the apparent edge of the encirclement and believe the worst is over. Instead, the route reveals a concealed military camp, hidden so carefully that its soldiers are killing every witness who might report its existence. The scouts understand that the pursuit was never a routine border clash. The enemy is protecting a larger operation, and reaching the secret camp has made every surviving member of Encrid's unit a target. Every successful maneuver rests on deaths the scouts cannot remember. Encrid has already seen which shortcuts hide hounds, which clearings become kill zones, and which delays close the sunset gap. His calm leadership is the visible result of an enormous private casualty list. There is no safe road back. Encrid immediately begins forming a new plan, using what he has learned about the guards, terrain, and daily schedule. To escape, the scouts will have to turn the enemy's hidden base against itself. After many failed infiltrations, Encrid knows the hidden camp almost as well as its defenders. Guard rotations, supply paths, and blind corners are fixed in his memory. One object consistently draws the attention of the entire force: the command flag. He divides the scouts into a bait team and a strike team. One group creates noise and pulls soldiers away, while the other carries oil and fire toward the center. Their goal is not to defeat the camp, but to make its own discipline collapse. The plan works. Flames spread between the tents, and the threatened Standard Forces officers and guards to abandon their positions. Confusion opens the escape route Encrid has been building across many repetitions. Then an elite enemy fighter appears. His speed, control, and precision exceed every soldier Encrid expected to face. The warrior crosses the burning camp and closes the distance before the scouts can use their advantage. Encrid can read a gap in the attack, but his body cannot exploit it. The realization is painful. Knowledge has carried him to the correct answer, yet his current technique is still too weak to perform it. He uses the fire, smoke, and collapsing formation to delay the warrior rather than chase an impossible victory. That choice gives Henri and the remaining scouts enough time to reach the tall grass outside the camp. The operation also shows how Encrid's leadership has changed. He no longer treats companions as pieces that can be sacrificed during an experiment. The bait and strike teams receive roles built around their strengths, and the escape route matters more to him than personal glory. Encrid barely escapes, but he does not consider the encounter a defeat. The elite fighter has shown him a new standard of swordsmanship. Somewhere beyond the flames stands another wall, and Encrid already intends to return strong enough to cross it. Fire races through the oil-soaked tents while Encrid faces the elite warrior. Every exchange drives him toward his limit. The opponent's blade is faster and more refined, but Encrid uses the burning camp to deny him a clean battlefield. The scouts cannot win a direct confrontation. Their only chance is to keep the command area in chaos long enough to withdraw. As flames approach the flag, enemy soldiers abandon the pursuit to protect the symbol holding their formation together. The elite fighter is forced to break away. Before leaving, he promises Encrid that they will meet again. The threat confirms that the encounter was not accidental. The warrior has also chosen Encrid as an opponent worth remembering. Henri guides the exhausted scouts onto a hidden trail known only to hunters. They move through the night with enemies behind them, refusing to stop until the light of dawn finally appears beyond the grass. Morning advances instead of resetting. The Green Pearl Day has been cleared, and the surviving scouts understand that Encrid brought them through a situation designed to erase every witness. Andrew's contempt has been replaced by reluctant respect. At the ruined position, the independent Grey Dog Company examines the damage. Its platoon commander, Mitch Herkera, hears the name of the soldier responsible for the fire and becomes fixated on finding him. Clearing the day does not erase its cost. Encrid carries memories of failed routes and dead scouts even as the survivors celebrate. Their respect is based on one successful night, while his responsibility was shaped by every version in which he could not save them. Mitch vows to kill Encrid personally. Encrid has not yet seen his face, but the promise made in the burning camp and the new enemy moving toward him are connected. The next wall is already approaching before he has time to rest. Back at camp, Andrew and the surviving scouts thank Encrid for leading them through Green Pearl. Andrew no longer speaks to him as an inferior officer. He promises that their paths may cross again, this time with the respect earned on the battlefield. Vengeance is equally surprised that Encrid survived the ambush, discovered the hidden camp, and burned its command position. Encrid credits the scouts and good fortune, but the result forces everyone to reconsider the commander once dismissed as talentless. He quickly returns to training. Sparring with Rem and Ragna still ends in defeat, yet both men must work harder than before. Encrid has not reached their level, but he can finally create moments that make his monstrously strong companions respond seriously. Ragna notices that Encrid's techniques were learned in the wrong order. The beast's heart, stabbing form, mercenary habits, and lessons from repeated deaths all exist separately, without a clean foundation connecting them. When asked why he keeps forcing himself forward, Encrid answers without embarrassment. He wants to grow stronger and become a knight, someone capable of fighting for honor, protecting the weak, and standing beside the people he loves. The dream sounds impossible for a man with so little natural talent, but Ragna does not laugh. He recognizes an honesty that cannot be faked and a persistence that has already changed Encrid's sword. Ragna's offer matters because it is the first structured path Encrid has received. Until now, he collected survival tools wherever death exposed a weakness. A real teacher can finally arrange those fragments into swordsmanship that grows without requiring a crisis for every lesson. Ragna draws his weapon and asks whether Encrid wants to learn swordsmanship properly. The question offers no shortcut or secret technique. It is an invitation to tear down everything unstable and begin again from the first step. Encrid accepts Ragna's offer immediately. The first lesson is not an advanced technique, but choosing a longsword suited to his body. Ragna makes it clear that strength is useless when the weapon, grip, and stance fight against one another. He corrects the position of Encrid's hands, the pressure of his fingers, the angle of his shoulders, and the distance between his feet. Every adjustment feels small, yet together they expose how much effort Encrid wasted compensating for bad fundamentals. The beast's heart, stabbing form, and mercenary swordsmanship remain valuable, but they were added without a shared structure. Ragna orders him to set those habits aside and rebuild the movement from balance, weight transfer, and a clean line of attack. Encrid follows without arguing. Starting over does not insult the years he already spent training. It gives those years somewhere stable to stand. For the first time, he feels what the sword should do before muscle and desperation distort it. The lesson is interrupted by an emergency deployment. Enemy forces are gathering beyond the camp, and the 4th Squad is ordered to join a battlefield arranged in an unfamiliar formation. A dense, unnatural fog rolls across the field and swallows the opposing army. Before anyone can locate the threat, warning cries erupt and arrows begin falling from inside the white curtain. Vengeance orders shields raised across the line. Ragna worries that teaching him may have been a mistake because Encrid absorbs instructions with unsettling intensity. What looks like one morning of correction is supported by years of stubborn repetition, making the supposedly slow learner respond in ways his teacher cannot easily explain. Experienced soldiers identify the phenomenon as the fog of annihilation, a spell designed to create one-sided slaughter. Encrid has barely learned how to stand correctly, and his new foundation is about to be tested where he cannot even see the enemy. Inside the fog, Encrid cannot see the arrows or soldiers attacking him. He dies before the lesson from Ragna can become instinct and wakes at the beginning of the morning. The battlefield has created another repeating day. Rather than searching for an immediate escape, Encrid turns the loop into sword practice. Each deployment lets him test one part of the stance under real pressure. Lowering his center, relaxing his legs, keeping the blade aligned, and moving without unnecessary tension. Ragna explains that stabbing, slashing, and cutting are only visible results. Proper swordsmanship begins with distance and the line of attack. Defense is not passive blocking. It is placing your weapon where the opponent must respect it. Encrid dies for leaning too far, freezing his hips, or lifting his feet at the wrong time. Every failure isolates a defect that ordinary training might take months to reveal. The fog kills him, but it also removes excuses. By the 31st version of the day, his movement becomes flexible. He can evade an arrow, redirect a strike, and answer with his own blade instead of merely surviving behind it. Small corrections have started accumulating into a different body. On the 100th day, even Ragna is startled by the change. The student who could barely reproduce a stance now reads distance and creates a proper attack. Ragna begins looking at Encrid as someone capable of learning rather than a hopeless burden. The repeated day compresses a lifetime of fundamental practice into a single battle. Ragna gives a correction once, but Encrid may test it through dozens of deaths before their next conversation. That hidden difference is why his progress seems impossible to anyone watching from outside the loop. Encrid responds with a smile. He understands that the road to knighthood exists beyond pain, repetition, and countless deaths. If dying allows him to keep learning, he is willing to return to this battlefield as many times as it takes. After more than 200 repetitions, Encrid moves through the fog without relying on sight. His hearing catches approaching bodies, his feet control distance, and his hands finish the actions before uncertainty can freeze them. He combines Jackson's perception, the beast's heart, and Ragna's fundamentals into one system. Techniques that once pulled against each other finally cooperate, allowing Encrid to fight several hidden enemies and push farther into their formation. A mysterious voice calls him a foolish mortal who has walked into his own grave. The next reset returns Encrid to camp, where he questions Rem about the difference between ordinary magic and a structured spell. Rem explains that a spell requires a medium. Encrid remembers the guarded standards inside the enemy formation and realizes that one of the flags must be sustaining the fog of annihilation. Destroying soldiers alone will never end it. Ragna also describes the great sword traditions and introduces the principle of concentrating on a single point. Eyes, feet, hands, breath, and intention must arrive together instead of acting as separate pieces. The idea connects everything Encrid has learned. The beast's heart controls fear, hearing supplies information, and proper footwork creates the line. But pure concentration is what will drive his sword through the final opening. Learning the flag's role changes the problem from endless combat into a mission with a finish line. Encrid no longer needs to defeat an entire army in the fog. He needs enough control, information, and concentrated force to reach one object while his companions hold the formation together. Encrid enters the fog again with a new objective. Survival is no longer enough. He intends to break through the enemy formation, identify the spell's true medium, and destroy the flag that has kept this battlefield trapped in white darkness. Encrid has now repeated the fog-covered battlefield roughly 300 times. He knows where arrows fall, which soldiers close the gaps, and how to remove wasted movement. What looks reckless to others is a route refined through hundreds of deaths. He reaches one of the guarded standards and cuts it down. The victory should end the spell, but the fog remains. The enemy anticipated this attack and planted decoy flags, ensuring that destroying a visible target reveals nothing. Every wrong choice consumes another version of the day. Encrid tests the standards one by one, memorizing the defenders and comparing the fog after each destruction. The solution has become a process of elimination paid for with his life. Rem serves as the spearhead, charging into the enemy line and drawing attention. Encrid uses the opening to travel farther than any lone soldier should survive. To his squad, the plan seems suicidal. To him, it is another route already practiced. More than a year of subjective time passes inside the repeated day. Only the final approach remains, and Encrid believes he is close to the true medium. Then the elite warrior from the burned camp steps directly into his path. The man introduces himself as Mitch Herkera, platoon commander of the Grey Dog Company. He is furious that Encrid appears to have forgotten the promise made 10 days earlier, even though this version of Encrid has never personally met him. The decoys reveal that the enemy understands how soldiers think. Each flag is convincing enough to attract a desperate attacker, and the defenders exploit the confusion created by the fog. Encrid answers not with intuition, but with a complete record of tested possibilities. Encrid understands that the mystery can wait. Mitch is the warrior who guarded the path before, and he has returned as the final wall between Encrid and the real flag. The repeating day will not end until that wall is crossed. Mitch attacks with swordsmanship far beyond the ordinary soldiers in the fog. Hundreds of repetitions allow Encrid to survive the opening exchanges, but the Grey Dog commander controls distance and timing well enough to force him back. When Mitch kills him, the morning resets. Encrid immediately seeks the same duel again, using his enemy as a teacher who does not know the lesson is repeating. Each death reveals a step, angle, feint, or change of balance. Mitch is disturbed by how quickly Encrid seems to improve. From his perspective, only minutes separate each adjustment. For Encrid, dozens of complete fights have passed, and the pain of every incorrect answer remains fresh. Raw knowledge is still insufficient. Encrid begins recreating the state of pure concentration Ragna described, allowing the battlefield to fade until only the opposing sword remains. At first, the sensation appears by accident and disappears immediately. The 18th, 28th, and 48th attempts gradually make the state familiar. Encrid learns to enter it intentionally, absorbing the feeling into his body instead of waiting for fear and desperation to trigger it. Ragna sees the result during training. Encrid is gathering his nerves, power, sight, and weapon into a single point. The technique is rough and incomplete, but it is no longer something he produces by luck. Repeatedly facing Mitch does more than teach Encrid one opponent's moves. It shows him how a trained swordsman connects intention to action without hesitation. By surviving a little longer each time, Encrid begins replacing improvised habits with a coherent rhythm of his own. With that progress, Encrid straps on his sword and returns to the fog. He is no longer charging blindly toward the flag. He intends to find Mitch, overcome the rival who sharpened him, and finally force this endless today to move forward. Before deployment, Encrid tells Vengeance what he has learned. The fog is a spell, a flag serves as its medium, and the visible standards are decoys. He then enters the battlefield with a rout aimed at both the true flag and Mitch Herkera. Encrid calls Mitch by name and openly challenges him. Their swords collide along paths Encrid has died to memorize. Mitch grows increasingly unsettled as the supposedly mediocre soldier anticipates habits that should be impossible to know. Pushed to his limit, Mitch prepares the wheel cut, the technique that once made him a champion and restored pride to the Herkera name. It combines several slashing lines into an attack designed to overwhelm any normal defense. Encrid has been killed by the wheel cut too many times to mistake its beginning. He keeps his balance, sees the hidden path between the overlapping strikes, and concentrates every part of himself on the single moment their blades must meet. The ultimate attack is parried. Mitch is forced to admit that Encrid won their contest, but Grey Dog soldiers rush forward and drag their wounded commander away before Encrid can deliver the final blow. There is no time to chase him. Enemy troops close around Encrid while the fog continues hiding the formation. Winning the duel has removed one wall, but the repeating day will remain until the spell's real medium is destroyed. The duel is the clearest proof of Encrid's accumulated growth. Hearing, fear control, footwork, distance, and concentration all appear in one exchange. None of those abilities was a miracle received at once. Each was built behind the scenes through days of failure only he remembers. Encrid turns toward the final rout with his sword still raised. Breaking the flag and securing an escape are now the last tasks standing between him and tomorrow. Surrounded and exhausted, he advances to overcome this today once and for all.